Here to explain what's going on and what should happen next is Joe DiGenova, legal analyst, former U.S. Attorney to the District of Columbia. Joe, good to have you with us, sir.
Good to be with you, Vince.
It is amazing. One of the things I'm seeing, now that we're in the Trump era again, it's amazing that the left is able to use the courts in this way to stagger the Trump agenda. I seem to remember during the Biden years that nobody could find any plaintiff whatsoever to have standing to secure our borders. It was like impossible. And now in the Trump era, it's anything he does, every word that comes out of his mouth, there's an injunction imposed against him. What's going on?
Well, this is lawfare in the extreme. What they've done is they lost the election. They lost the argument with the American people, and now they're going to their favorite venue, which has always been their favorite venue, which is the courts, and to try and get the courts to determine what the rule of law will be in the United States and what U.S. public policy will be. Most of these decisions will ultimately be overturned, but it's going to take time, and there's nothing good about that when you're trying to put the ship of state back on a steady course. This is difficult work. That's why presidents need 2 terms. Trump's, unfortunately, was truncated, and his second term is 4 years, and that's it. So what they want to do is delay and cause harm. And it's up to Donald Trump to have really good lawyers helping him from the DOJ to make sure that these judges are reversed. One
of the basic elements here is the matter of spending and wise spending. Obviously, Congress appropriates funds, but the president, as the chief executive actually administers those funds. The left is saying that he has no discretion whatsoever. I mean, is that even constitutional?
Well, he has discretion. There are certain things that he can do to prevent the spending of money if it's deemed to be improper or illegal or fraudulent. He's not without power. But the problem is the power has been vaguely granted ever since they passed the Impoundment Act to prevent presidents from stopping spending money. So this is a very murky area. But the president is doing the right thing. He's laying out his plan. He's saying what he wants to do. And he's ordering DOJ to do its work. Now, DOJ can continue to do its work without stopping spending. But stopping the spending in specific instances is going to require litigation, because all these labor unions, these government employee labor unions, are going to sue. And, of course, they're going to claim that they have standing, and the courts are going to find that they do, that they're being adversely affected by the holding up of these funds, or they're going to find some beneficiary who's not going to get the funds that he or she was entitled to. It's a tough road.
I've mentioned before the former and now current head of the OMB, Russ Vought. He's talked about the Impoundment Control Act that you just referred to of 1974, and he said one of the insanities of it is that it basically says that Congress will dictate spending, and that the president doesn't have the right to save Americans' money, which is crazy. And Congressman Andrew Clyde and Senator Mike Lee, they've recently introduced legislation to repeal the Impoundment Control Act, but they submit, and Mike Lee seems like the kind of guy to be trusted on this especially, he says this is unconstitutional. This is an Article II power. The president is entitled to save Americans' money where he can. In other words, go ahead.
Yeah, I think that Mike Lee is correct. And I think that was the next part of the argument, which was going to be, if the president is not allowed under the Impoundment Act to do this, then he has to challenge the constitutionality of it in court. And the way you do that is by doing what he's doing and wait for a judge to issue an order saying that he can't do it under the Impoundment Act. And once that joins the issue, then you have the opportunity to appeal it and maybe get it to the Supreme Court. Because what they're going to argue is that this is the unitary executive theory of Constitution, which is that there's one executive branch. It's the President of the United States, and all these civil servants and other people who aren't mentioned in Article 2 have no standing whatsoever, even though we have civil service laws.
Yes. So that leads me to this. To what extent could the left be walking into a trap here? That's what I want to explore, because it seems to me, so for instance, the executive order that declares that illegal immigrants are not entitled to birthright citizenship for their children in the United States, that executive order seems like it's explicitly built to fight its way through the court in order to resolve the constitutional questions there. Is the left walking into a trap of sorts. Is this the kind of thing the White House desires, that this works its way up to the court so they can finally spread their wings and start working on behalf of the American people?
Well, even if they don't desire it, it's what's going to happen. I mean, the litigation against the president's policies is going to continue, and they are going to work their way up through the courts. So whether the administration wants it or not, although I'm sure they'd rather just have no lawsuits filed.
Right.
But if they're going to be filed, they would prefer to win. And, birthright citizenship is up for grabs. The spending, the empowerment issue, that's up for grabs. So there are some very serious core constitutional issues. The problem I think they're going to face is, I think John Roberts has gotten cold feet. After the presidential immunity ruling, I think he and Amy Coney Barrett have gotten very, very concerned about the institutional court and its status with the American people. And I think they're going to pull their punches, just like Roberts did on the Obamacare case when he was originally going to vote for it and then changed his mind when Obama attacked him viciously in public.
There are other Supreme Court justices who have weighed in on some of the behaviors we're witnessing right now. Back in 2020, Jerry Dunleavy reminds me today that Neil Gorsuch and Clarence Thomas came out and talked about these nationwide injunctions imposed by these lower courts and said that this is becoming a real problem. In other words, there are some Supreme Court justices, at least, who want to take this on.
Oh, I think that the nationwide injunction issue, which is separate from the substance of these various lawsuits. In other words, you could file a lawsuit in New York in the Southern District, and the judge says, okay, in this district, you can't do this. But he didn't do that. Engelmayer said, you can't do this anywhere in the country. So his injunction covered the whole United States. And the constitutional question is, can judges do that? And I don't think they can. And I think the court may very well address that issue and say, you can deal with a specific district and a specific circuit, but you cannot enjoin the entire country. You have to litigate everywhere. And I think that's where I think that may be where the Supreme Court decides it's going to make its stand, which is these nationwide injunctions are unwise, they are disruptive. And again, when you think about it, this is one federal judge, unelected, he has tenure for life, and he's stopping the entire United States government all over the country. I think that's absurd. And I think the court may very well, they may have 5 votes to say that that's unconstitutional.
Arizona Congressman Eli Crane has said he has drafted articles of impeachment against that U.S. District Judge Paul Engelmayer. Do you think that this would be a prudent thing to do, to impeach one of these judges in order to send a message that this is getting out of control?
Well, I like the idea, but it's not going to happen because the House of Representatives does not have the stomach to impeach a federal judge. I think there are circumstances in which impeachment would be justified. Whether or not you can do it because of a particular case, I don't know. I mean, and I don't think there's any law on that. Whether or not, you have high crimes and misdemeanors to justify impeachment, or you can say that a judge, federal judges serve for they have a lifetime as long as it's for good behavior, that they maintain good behavior. It's going to be tough to argue that this type of ruling is not good behavior, but I think the fact that people are introducing articles of impeachment is good. I think it gives people a chance to understand, if it's properly explained, why this is being done and how federal judges, in the view of some people who are elected officials, federal judges are going beyond their authority. By the way, this is something the Supreme Court can deal with. They can slap down these nationwide injunctions. So can Congress, by the way. Congress can pass a law because they have complete control over the jurisdiction of federal courts. They can say that district court judges may not issue nationwide injunctions. They have the constitutional authority to do that. And I don't know why they haven't done it anyway. It's been such a horrible problem.
And also, like, the left is obviously like court shopping. They're picking courts that will do this, and
clearly.
so
Rhode Island, Boston, New York. Give me a break.
Yes, and so that has to be against the intention of the framers. I mean, they weren't looking for you to like shop for the court that was going to give you your desired outcome. They really wanted a kind of a blind assessment of whether or not something was legal.
Of course, and in those days at that time, judges were judges. Now judges are more than judges, and we have seen through the nomination process and the selection of judges by various precedents that people are coming on the bench who have judicial philosophies that are really way out. Certainly among some of the Democratic nominees over the last few years under Biden and Obama, some of the people who were put on the bench were simply outrageous. And the thing that offends me is how a lot of Republican senators say, well, this is not a person that I would nominate, but if the president wants this person, I'm going to vote. But I'm going to vote for it. Well, that's nonsense. If the person isn't qualified, you vote against them. This is what Lindsey Graham does all the time. He votes for everybody, and he expects the Democrats to reciprocate. And of course, they never do, and they're never going to.
It's amazing. Yeah, in fact, one of these judges out of Rhode Island, appointed by Obama, Judge John McConnell, who I mentioned before, is like the guy is on tape comparing Trump's first term to the Civil War and Jim Crow. He said that President Trump should have hired fewer white people to be judges. He's insane, and yet he is imposing like these crazy injunctions on a nationwide level.
Those tapes have just become public in the last 24 hours, and I think they should be used by the Justice Department to force him to recuse himself. He clearly has an animus toward this administration and cannot be neutral and detached, which is what the judge has to be. I just saw those tapes today before coming on your show, and they are appalling. I mean, this guy is a screwball.
Yeah. Lastly, Joe DiGenova, I was talking in the last hour about this talking point that the left is using, that somehow Trump is bringing us into constitutional crisis. But I can't help but notice that it was Joe Biden who literally invented that you could add an amendment to the Constitution of the United States, that multiple Democrats attorneys general were held in contempt of Congress, and then they refused to actually pursue any charges against them because Democrats controlled the Justice Department. The list on this is endless. What do you think of this constitutional crisis talking point?
It's the nonsense that the Democrats have devolved into. They like catchphrases. Constitutional crisis is their way of saying we don't have any policies, so we're going to scream that everything is the end of the world. And of course, this is utterly nonsensical. There's no crisis. This is a president implementing policy that he was elected to implement. The Democrats don't like it, and so what they're doing is they're litigating, screaming and yelling, and basically making false statements. I haven't quite figured out what the constitutional crisis is. Congress is objecting. They're doing stupid things in public, which they have the right to do. They're going on the floor of the House and the Senate, and they're making their speeches. What's the crisis? The crisis is the Democrats haven't accepted defeat, and they haven't accepted, and since they don't have a leader and they don't have ideas, they swear and they curse and they drop the F-bombs in public. I mean, I know you've watched these people singing and doing these idiotic performances in public, and I don't know what it takes to embarrass them. I mean, I don't know. What kind of people are they? Where's the dignity of public office? Good Lord.
Yeah, they're totally shameless. Hey, Joe DiGenova, you are great, and I always love talking to you, sir. Thank you for coming on today. I really appreciate that.